Yeah,
There we are.
glorious. It's so nice to see you.
You too, as ever.
As ever. It's becoming more and more frequent, and
It
that
is.
I'm so for that. Did I tell you, or did I tell Sam that I was listening to you play on my stereo doing the dishes when lockdown started, and I started crying because I thought I'd never see you ever again.
You did mention something like this to me. Yeah, yeah.
I catastrophized.
Did you get carried away?
I got so carried away with all the I went the full down the anxiety rabbit hole. I was like, "This
Yeah,
is me."
swept away in the tidal wave of negativity that is
Yeah.
surrounding us at the moment.
I know. Let's talk about that. For those who don't know, you are Dan Searle. You're the drummer of Architects. You're a metalcore band, post metalcore, libtard.
Yeah.
What did we?
When people ask, I say I play in a metal band. Or usually I don't say. I try and not say metal. I just say I play in a band, and then they say what type of music, and I go, oh, metal band.
And
And they
then
go, oh, and they go like Iron Maiden, and I go, yeah, sure.
I love that. Whenever I talk about metal and hardcore and metalcore, people always say, "Oh, why do you like that screamy Satan music?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's 2020, not 1985. There's no backwards messages in the vinyl.
Yeah,
What do
yeah. We're not
what do
that
you
smart.
think? We're not. Why do you think people have such misconceptions about metal and hardcore?
Well, I guess because it's just part of it's still largely part of a counterculture that is hidden from mainstream view. You know, I think the consumption of media from the majority of humanity keeps you in a pretty narrow lane, doesn't it? So if you're sheltered from the reality of, well, it could be all sorts of things, but in this case, metal music, then you would really have no idea, would you? I mean, I say Iron Maiden. I remember being at one of my wife's relatives, and a friend of theirs came around, and he said, "Oh, you're in a band." And I said I was in a metal band. Like, he got it out of me, and he said, "Oh, what, like Deep Purple?" And I said, "Oh, a bit heavier." And he went, "Heavier than Deep Purple?" Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, because I mean, you've been around heavy music. The part of your life that's counted the most. Like your
yeah,
adult life, and
yeah,
I mean, you know as well as I do that it's full of like all these gentle souls that are trying to
yeah,
escape from
yeah.
harrowing realities where they don't fit
Yeah.
in.
Well, I think as I've gotten older, I've come to realize more and more that, well, not come to realize, I've sort of formulated a theory that it attracts people that aren't good at expressing anger or don't know the correct way to, or perhaps were brought up in a way where they felt like they weren't able to express that in a safe space, you know?
Mm.
Um, and obviously, like, that might not be totally indicative of who I am now, or who my bandmates are now, but definitely indicative of who I was when I began playing the music. Obviously, there's an element of that in me and my bandmates that will still be there, but I think that, obviously, you pick your path, and we're very much on that path, and I'm not. It still resonates, and we still love doing what we do, so we wouldn't just discard it. Although, of course, you want to find a balance where you're not faking it as well. So,
Yeah.
I think we've gradually gotten less angry, or perhaps found ways to express our anger more, um, in a more sort of, I don't know, adult way. Let's just say.
I feel like lyrically, Architects has moved from perhaps anger that's about one's personal situation and personal feelings to a more political global viewpoint. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but then I feel like on Holy Hell it became more sad. It was sadness and anger. Obviously, it was an album that just centered around grief. But moving forward, that's not going to be the case. There will be touches of that because it's a big thing in our lives, and that's obviously my life specifically, given that I'm writing the lyrics. But I don't know. Everyone changes and evolves over time, don't they? And it's important not to. It is important not to just phone it in or fake it or do some imitation of how you felt another time, because I think people sniff that out, don't they? So,
Yeah.
and obviously, you know, I've had a kid since the last record. Josh has had a kid since the last record, and we are between the two of us, we are writing the vast majority of the music. So that's going to play into it in some way. And I feel like fatherhood has made me more reflective about who I am, more honest about who I am, and it's just presented different challenges. But of course, then when you have a child, you do start thinking about the world again, and it's because you think, well, when am I leaving? What world am I going to leave for my child? And obviously, that's a pretty scary question.
I just going back to two things that you said there. I always listen to, like, you know, you hear some 50 Cent or some, you know, some mainstream hip hop artists who came from poverty and violence, but now they're like richer than your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And I think that I agree with you in that it seems fake now, right? But that seems to be what people like to consume. People like to consume
I think this is like the $1 million question, if you're a record label executive, is why do these enormous, once prolific bands suddenly find it so difficult to replicate or, you know, revisit that same sort of that same glory that they had in the past, the same quality of output. And I think it's just because people change. And it doesn't always happen. You know, some bands remain consistent, and some bands, through the changes or accumulation of wealth, remain perhaps troubled enough to write the same quality of music they've always done. But I think I don't want to name names, you know, because that it's all subjective, isn't it? But certainly it's obviously a trend, which is why you see festival headliners tending not to close the set with the lead single from their newest album. Rather, it tends to be one from the 80s or the 90s, you know, or maybe the early 2000s.
Yeah, because I guess that resonates with their fans the most.
Yeah.
Because their fans might not have been on that journey of, like, I don't know, therapy and healing, and be in like a stuck place. Do you think artists have like a responsibility to encourage growth in an individual? Because I've really taken to that sort of like lo-fi hip hop lately, right? And there's a lot of songs about like bad mental health and suicidal ideation and self-medication with prescription drugs. And I'm like, okay, that's reflective of your experience, but there are a lot of impressionable kids out there, and you're kind of romanticizing this. Do you think
glorifying?
Yeah, kind of glorifying it.
I think the responsibility is there if you want it. You know, I mean, it's optional. I suggest people take it up, but obviously a lot don't. And I think that, I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because that stuff does seem to resonate with people, but equally, like you say, people also resonate with, you know, I've got this many cars and this many houses and all that kind of stuff as well. For whatever reason, it seems people, maybe it's because of like the those cultural myths we have surrounding the sort of reaching the top of the pyramid and having that accumulation of wealth, and that being the sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And listening to it sort of makes us think, yeah, you know, like life will be great when I get there, you know. Look at these guys.
It's the capitalist dream.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like glorifying drug use and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I would suggest it's not a good idea, but it's a tough one, because how much do you maybe is anyone really so proud of their drug use? Or, I mean, if you're writing a song about that in a kind of like, I do this and I don't necessarily like it and want help, which I'm sure some of it is, you know, it is along those lines, then perhaps that's totally authentic, in which case you sort of get to a difficult sort of philosophical question about art and what that can and can't be. Because I felt and I still feel, and this opens up to a wider subject, I still feel like I feel responsible about what I write about, and I'm relatively new to it, having only written the lyrics on the last record, and obviously working on stuff for the future. I worry about how people will read into it, and if you read this line and you're in a certain frame of mind, are you going to think, "Fuck it, I'm going to kill myself"? You know what I mean? Like it could be seen it could be the perspective of an individual could really colour what you've written in a certain way, and then you think, but it's all about context for me. So it's a hard one.
I find I think that's a real problem with social media in general, and we've talked about this in person. Like, people forget that they're reading it from their context, through their lens of experience and knowledge and life experience, and that means that what's written on the screen doesn't necessarily, like the interpretation isn't exactly what's being said, and then it's like, well, how do we never say anything ever, because it could be taken the wrong way?
But that's this is what I was saying, kind of the subject it opens up to. I feel like, I've virtually completely withdrawn from social media for a long time now, because I'm tired of trying to express any opinion. And it can be the most mundane opinion, and the most common response will be contrarian invariably, and that is just like, my mind gets drawn into it, and it's a waste of my energy, because I then want to go to war with some faceless entity and try and win. I want to be right. I want to get, I'm an easy target for not even trolls, just people who have that, whatever that psychological quirk is that seems to affect so many people, where they have to say, I disagree. You idiot.
Yeah. I know, I had that the other day, and then I kind of wasn't particularly cool, I suppose, in hindsight, but someone was talking about what should post COVID-19 activism look like online, and I wrote, hopefully kinda.
Yeah.
And then someone took umbrage with that and said, well, that's tone policing, when you're encouraging people to always be kind and nice. And then I just was kind of like, all right, so if I said go fuck yourself, like, is that the way to start a conversation? And of course, it devolved, and it just seemed like, I don't know. Yeah, you're right.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. And yet, I'm like you. I find so much of my time consumed by the idiocy of it all.
And part of me thinks, I'm sat here talking to you, and this will be on the internet, and I've just said I've withdrawn myself from social media because I can't be bothered to waste my energy on. Don't be sorry. Waste my energy on squabbling with people over trivial disagreements, or not so trivial, either way. And what, in my mind, I'm thinking people are going to go, oh, you fucking snowflake, like, you can't deal with the odd person on the internet disagreeing with you. And I did for years, but I just can't be bothered. And I think having a child made me think, when I'm not really sleeping very much, and I'm up in the night, and then during the day, am I really going to get drawn into these basically meaningless arguments with people?
You're not going to change.
Which doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
And I think Ramdas said it, like, what do you want to be, happy or right? I'm like, well,
I love that. You should
I
make
would
that
rather be happy.
a t-shirt. Yeah.
So maybe I'll get drawn in one day. I don't know.
I got drawn in today. No, actually, I didn't get drawn in today. After the other day's experience, I put something up today about I don't know, pills and surgery, and there's a huge queue of people.
I saw it. Yeah.
And that comes from a well-meaning place. Like, I was like, yeah, there are social drivers of human behavior, and we've all got different psychological states, and advertising and marketing, and there are a whole bunch of reasons that certain people end up in certain ways. Let's not discount that, but ultimately, once we have a degree of knowledge, we can change our position, right? Like we can make choices that make our lives better and keep us like on the planet longer and make us better role models to our children. And I get frustrated that people forget that you've got history too. You know, like, you know, I'm quite public about the fact that my dad was like an abusive, depressive alcoholic and growing up sucked, you know, but I don't use it as an excuse for my bad behavior. Like, it can explain it, but, you know, ultimately it's only me that can change it.
It's an educational issue as well, though, isn't it? It's because it's about like how much knowledge you have to achieve these things, and most people don't have that. I just want to make one point quickly about the level of contrarianism that exists. The best example I have from personal experience on the internet is saying on the internet that my wife was pregnant and we were going to have a baby, and I had someone saying they were so disappointed with me, an anti-natalist saying they were so disappointed in me that I was going to have I can't believe you're having a child when, you know, it's such an irresponsible thing to do given the state of the world. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm out.
Oh my God.
But going back to your point where you were taking the conversation, I think this is probably where I'm at, certainly, like in terms of what I want to write about with the band is change, the ability to change, the difficulty in change, understanding how to change, the frustration of grappling with change, and the kind of paradox that everything is change, always changing, and we desperately cling on to things not changing, and it makes us so unhappy. And yet when it comes to us actually wanting to change who we are or how we are or things we do, say, you know, think, how difficult that can be and how little understanding there is surrounding that. And obviously you can read into that, and there are people that have written extensively about it, and it's absolutely possible. But everything in our modern culture kind of stands in our way from achieving it, I find. And, you know, in a world with so much distraction inbuilt, it means that we are constantly pulled away from the sort of focus that we require to become the people we would rather be. And becoming a father, for me, that was the biggest thing, you know, like, well, who do I want to be for my daughter, and what father do I want to be? And because they are going to mirror you, and there's no hiding, you know, like I can't be like, it's no use thinking I want to be this person, because she will be with me all the time enough to see who I really am. And, you know, it's one thing to put on that front, being the best version of myself that I can be in front of my mates or whatever, but ultimately I'm going to revert back to the flawed version of myself that, you know, that really exists when you put away all my efforts, you know, because they will wear down.
Who do you want to be? What sort of father do you want to be?
Oh, just like, I suppose, anyone. I just want to be like a kind, nice, happy person, but whilst accepting that we all have a darker side of ourselves, and not sort of beating myself up for that existing. But I want to be patient and, you know, and kind and understanding, and you know, children have a way of pushing your buttons and showing you where the weak links in your armor are, and as opposed to sort of falling victim to those, I suppose it's about taking responsibility and asking yourself, what can I do to change, or how can I work on myself, and can I own those again, flaws isn't really the right word, but can I own those characteristics, take responsibilities for them, and move towards becoming a better person, you know. Because it's easy, I think, especially for a lot of men, it's historically been hard, you know, because obviously there's a lot of awful fathers in the world, and I know so many women, particularly, I find, with bad fathers. And obviously you've spoken about your experiences with your father. I have a degree of sympathy for those generations, because there was no understanding like that. Like, what do you do with these feelings? Well, I've got to hide them. I've got to be this way. How do I deal with it? Well, alcohol works, or drugs work, or running away works. You know, there's all sorts of ways out of getting away from facing who you really are or how you really feel. And now there's starting to be more of a conversation about it, and a little bit more understanding about it. And there's still a long way to go, obviously. But yeah, I do have sympathy for those people, despite all the bad things that they may have done historically.
I really appreciate that you have that sympathy and that empathy, because there's the old saying, you know, hurt people, and that's very true. It doesn't excuse one's violence or bad behavior or whatever it may be, but you need to understand that in order to change that and shift that. You know, I went through this big thing over summer. My father relapsed with his alcoholism, and my extended family came in, and I learned all this stuff about my family history that I didn't know, that my great-grandfather had been to World War One and had, you know, massive PTSD and trauma, and abandoned my grandfather, who in turn became, you know, one of those stoic males, who in turn raised my father, who became one of those stoic males trapped in all of that shit. And it makes sense how he turned out. And
I mean, globally we are carrying the trauma of two world wars still. I mean, and that just must have had the most enormous psychological impact on humanity and our behavior. I mean, and God knows life wasn't easy for hundreds of years or thousands of years, or however long before that. So if we had all been from day one, sort of, if humans had just arrived in a utopia all as blank slates, we would all be a little bit more functional. But that's just not reality, unfortunately. I know. But it is. I think there are things that have obviously exacerbated the issue, beside wars, and that is, you know, like the fact that we had no conversation or understanding surrounding it. And I feel like that still has such a long way to go. Because you know, obviously I'm not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination, but we still perhaps we medicate and don't have enough conversation to accompany the medicating, or that type of thing. But look, I've not been down that path, so I'm not really able to speak about it.
You use your platform to encourage people to change, right? Do you think Architects is like an activist band?
I don't use my platform for anything other than looking at your posts these days. But
terrible idea.
But I ought to, you know, and you know, I think I watched the Chappelle Mark Twain Awards thing, and it made me think, you know, like, obviously he's gotten so much grief for the things he said, but I watching that made me feel like, I really ought to be bolder and more honest. But, you know, maybe when my daughter's a bit older and I've got a little bit more energy spare, I don't know what. It does feel like there is some responsibility to even as a Z-list to have to use the platform. And
you're far from a Z-list. I've seen you on the cover of so many magazines.
Maybe a Y or an X.
But you are activist bands, like you guys support Sea Sheppard very openly, who are a controversial band. You're very all openly vegan. You know, I've been on
openly vegan, like openly gay.
Yeah, but you know, like that's still a controversy.
Yeah. Radical diet.
Yeah, and you ensure that when you tour, that you do everything you can to cut down on single-use plastics, and you've literally given me your stage to talk about stopping sexual violence and harassment, and not every band does that. You know, like you've let me talk to thousands of people, literally. Yeah. And that's, I think, quite a brave and alternative thing to do. A lot of people are just out there to like make money, play shows. Maybe there's some catharsis in it, but it's not about encouraging social change. And you guys do that.
I think, you know, we want to do what we can. I'm not sure that we even do that at this stage, though, because the things you're talking about are largely effortless. You know, like having you go on stage and speak, not taking much effort from me personally, and like telling our tour manager we don't want to have plastic on the rider anymore. And again, it's all relatively low effort, and We're not exactly sailing like Greta across the oceans to Australia. And so much there needs to be so much technological advance before things like bans, entities like bans, can operate on a global level, on an international level, and not have a terribly big carbon footprint. Obviously, we intend to do carbon offsetting and stuff, and pay those fees. To be honest, I'm not well read enough on the subject at this stage to know whether that is an effective way to mitigate the emissions that we will be directly responsible for. But yeah, we do hope to. We want to do what we can, and I think we can still do so much more. So I think this is something that came up a lot as we were finishing the last cycle, going to this time off. It's okay, well, next time round we need to do more, and we need to play our part. And yeah, hopefully this is my stand now with all this stuff. It's the same with being vegan, same with trying to reduce, be greener in whatever way we can. Is doing your small part, but I'm not expecting to save the world. I'm not saying that we're all doomed and everything is fucked. I'm largely optimistic, but I think I would like to die knowing that I lived my life in what I would see as the right way, and not feel that I had a negative impact on the world.
Do you get compassion fatigue? Do you get tired of caring about everything?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I definitely feel like I have to switch off from it all sometimes, and I often think and talk with people about the fact that I believe we're not necessarily designed to know what is happening in the world, everywhere, every day, on the scale that we are. That it's communicated to us, like for instance with the corona situation. I mean, we see all these big numbers and it's hard for us to comprehend any of it. I mean, I just walk down the street and see it's real quiet. I can't really get too wrapped up in X amount dead, X amount infected, or whatever. And I'm not sure. And this is where people will disagree with me and say that there's a responsibility to be aware of these things, but I'm not sure that there is a sort of net gain from us all having these large numbers thrown at us. I think maybe it's better to look at things on a community level, which is what I should imagine we are designed to grasp. Because when we start getting these bigger numbers, and we can't really, it's all a bit overwhelming, and I think it just frightens people, and humans living frightened all the time is going to create a more unhappy, less functional, society. Speaking. And I think we'll be less prosperous and less caring and all those kind of things. We'll become more about just looking after our own as opposed to looking after everybody, and I think that's just going to cause us more and more problems. But this is a result, obviously, of the media, and not even talking about conspiracy stuff surrounding the media that is so often talked about these days, but just like fear gets clicks and high ratings, and that's just we know that,
Yeah.
And so what's the effect of that? I mean, these people want the high ratings, they want clicks, they want they want their advertisers to pay more money, and how are you going to do it? It's just money, and that has a direct consequence on all of us and the way we behave, and that is really problematic. I don't have a solution. which often means I'm not allowed to talk about it. If you look at the way the internet is, you're not.
I know that
have a solution, or shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, how do you stay optimistic then?
Oh, just
like think global, but act local? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I do my honest best,
yeah.
you
If
know,
it's what anyone
and
can do, then
yeah, yeah, and um, I think again, if we get too caught up in what the media tells us, which shouldn't be called the news, it should be called the bad news mostly.
that, I love it. The
Bad news is on.
danger. Yeah.
Honey, the bad news is on. We've got some more bad news for us.
Yeah.
If we get too caught up into that, I think people will be paralyzed into making positive change. But maybe people will just claim that I'm pro-ignorance or something like that, you know, if I say this stuff. Yeah, I don't have all the solutions, if any, and things are obviously bad. But I choose to believe, people will criticize me for that, I choose to believe that we will make it. You know,
we're gonna get through.
We'll find a way, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about any of this stuff because, you know, again, it's like the COVID situation. It's hard to talk about. It's becoming more of a conversation, but I noticed, especially at the start, it was hard to have conversations about the potential benefits because people are going to die, and when people dying is the ultimate tragedy, and it overshadows and vetoes any conversation that might suggest that there is good in any of this. Yeah, I found this even with Tom dying. I felt like, oh, you know, like on a personal level, I might find some good in this situation, but I felt like, God, can I say that publicly? My brother died, but I'm going to try and find the positives, because that's kind of a radical statement. But like, what would Tom want? Don't find the positives in this, Dan. I want you to wallow, and I want your life to spiral out of control. You know, like, of course, these people want us to find the best in it and shoot for a better life, you know, on an individual and collective level.
For those who don't know, Tom's your twin brother who died of cancer.
Yes, yeah. So I felt like for a while that gave me that I was able to say that because I could, you know, like I say, we have a bad relationship with death, you know, particularly in the West, or you're in the East, sort of, aren't you? But yeah,
I don't know where I am. Like,
but we do. I mean, largely we have a terrible relationship with death, and it's hidden from view, and when it gets presented to us, we all recoil in horror, and I think it reflects our collective relationship with it, and our inability to face it and accept it as a undeniable, inevitable truth of existence. You know, and I'm no holy man. I haven't transcended my fear of death. It's very much there, but I do feel I'm able to see where our fear of death manifests on a cultural level sometimes, and how that can lead us away from maybe behaving or acting in a rational way. I don't know. Again, it's such a hard conversation because a lot of people dealing with this, listening to this, will be so terrified of death that even saying that, like, there's another perspective might be incomprehensible. And, you know, like, if I had yesterday lost a loved one, I'd probably, you know, this wouldn't be a conversation I'd be able to have, because at that point it's just like, it's so overwhelming.
You seem a lot like me in that you think about all the possible ways that you could be wrongly interpreted, and it kind of
it paralyzes me from speaking about.
Well, I've still put stuff out there, but it's exhausting.
Yeah, you're braver than me. Yeah, it is exhausting, and I think.
Or maybe I'm stupider than you. I don't know.
No, definitely not. I think you're probably braver and have more energy than me. it's definitely a commitment, you know, and I really do applaud people that are able to do that and stand by what they believe in publicly, because I mean, someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it.
It can be maddening. I need to, I don't know. I'm like, I'm just going to talk about my work and that's it, which is difficult enough. But maybe I'll just save some of my opinions.
And I also find it harder and harder to stand by anything like it's truth, you know, like,
yeah,
because truth is so like abstract, and I have no sense of what is real or what is true. You know, obviously things I've experienced firsthand, I can say with some degree of certainty, not actual certainty, but a degree of certainty, because, you know, my eyes might deceive me, or I might mishear something or misunderstand what I've just seen. You know, I can still be wrong about stuff I've experienced directly, but I find it hard to stand by any opinion with 100% certainty when it's just stuff I've read and been told from other people. And so I kind of remain, it's almost like agnostic to everything. Like, and people fucking hate fence sitters, you know, you've really got to choose a side. And
yeah.
You know,
did you watch that Neil Brennan I recommended to you the other day?
We ended up watching something else.
Well, he's really good. Like, I really enjoyed seeing him on that Chappelle special.
Yeah.
And then I went and found him on Joe Rogan. And they had this really interesting discussion when Neil Brennan was like, Joe, people say that you're like alt-right and you're all this and you're very conservative. And they had a pretty open discussion about it. And he's like, I'm not. I'm a liberal. Like, I vote Democrat. The only like step out of the orthodoxy that I do is I believe in gun rights. You know, he's pro Second Amendment and whatever. But they both said what you said, is that people aren't allowed to be on a fence. People aren't allowed to be 51% on an issue. You can't talk about, you have to be like, there has to be this polarity. Yeah, you have to be in the tribe. There has to be a polarity. And I find myself, I used to be, when I was at university and when I was in my 20s, you know, I used to be one of those annoying people on the internet. It was like, blah, 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 that's wrong. Or you're unjust, or, you know, all of this. But it's become so vociferous now that I find myself, without having shifted much on the political spectrum, I still have the same beliefs and values, and indeed more so because my life experience is married up with my academic understandings of things. But I find myself like without a strong desire to belong to who I used to position myself with, because of the way they behave online is so ugly.
Yeah, I've definitely written about this as well. Like, it's like I really struggle with like you, I identify as sitting on the left, but you know, it's probably too reductionistic, but I always perceived the right as being exclusive and the left being inclusive, and I felt that the left should stand for looking after people and trying to take care of the many at the expense of the few, kind of thing. You know, I don't identify as being a Marxist communist like some people would say, but I then, being inclusive to me doesn't mean screaming and shouting at people that disagree with you. Although I understand the impulse, I just feel like the left has, and it's probably always been this way, and I have this idealistic view of it, which is just perhaps never going to happen. But I want to see the left rise above name calling and shouting it, and we've discussed this. They're largely shouting at one another about who is more. You know, on the right side of morality, who is, you know, it becomes really convoluted, and it becomes infighting, and more intelligent people than me have spoken about this. I don't know if you've listened to Adam Curtis, who speaks really well about this. But it perhaps the failure of the left, and why we see the right dominating government around the planet, is the left is too busy just fighting with each
Fighting
other
with one another, right? I know, and it
yeah,
bums me out because I want social democratic green parties to
yeah,
be in government, to
yeah,
create juster, fairer kind of societies where all people have equal access to the help that they need, and
yeah,
we legislate against discrimination. And I want a kind world, but I
yeah,
feel like kindness isn't at the forefront of a lot of people's, at least online activism. And it leaves me, I used to get into it and I used to argue with people and then I'd lose my shit because I'd say like, well, get fucked, or you know, like I just run
yeah.
out of patience and I'd go back to this very teenage,
Yeah, well, I feel
like,
exactly the same way. I want to do the same thing. I mean, but people will come to you and try and take you to that place. That's
code
where they're
you,
trying to
right?
lead you.
Yeah, yeah.
They want it uh, to degrade the conversation into name calling, and a big part of me wants to go there with them. You know.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
I know
yeah, it's hard. It's
but it
hard.
fucks with you, but you lose. It's like Dalai Lama says, it's like being angry is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's, so I think your strategy of disengaging is actually smart.
Yeah, on perhaps on a personal level, I think I've become, in terms of like affecting positive change and swinging the pendulum to the left. And the funny thing about left is like, and me identifying as that, as far as I can see, that seems like the best, fairest, most positive way to run a country or the planet.
Me too.
I'm still open to the fact that I might be wrong, and maybe it doesn't work. Everyone's saying it doesn't work, but like I haven't really seen it tried in the way I have in my head. But then, you know, like I'm just going on my gut instinct on it. You know,
Well,
I'm not saying I'm right about anything, but I feel like the it's such a David and Goliath situation when the media drives public opinion, and rich people own the media, and rich people don't want a left-leaning government. So like, how do
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
how do you fight that? How can you win? Because you know, you get that impression, in your echo chamber or on the internet, that where, oh, you know, maybe this time things will be different, and then it's like a landslide victory for the right. And
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and
I
the
do.
days leading up to an election, the most of the newspapers tend to get more and more vicious towards the opposition, and people buy it. You know, people will totally buy it. But following the money in that way just seems to make sense to me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the newspapers and the billionaires that own them are genuinely concerned about the well-being of everyone, and feel like this is going to be really bad if we look after everyone, and the most vulnerable in our society are taken care of, and you know, us rich folk, we won't have quite as much money, but society as a whole will have less suffering, and people will be more happy. Maybe that is bad. I don't. To me, it seems like it would be a good thing.
It seems a bit like common sense to me. Like
But
it
this is
seems
what
it's
I'm
yeah.
doing it again. I tend to disclaim everything I say with like a, you know,
Just
maybe I'm
yeah.
wrong.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
you're
just a defense mechanism. I don't know, but I that's an extreme version of me
yeah. Just
thinking that I
you
could be wrong. I am just open to the idea, like, well, maybe I'm not right about stuff. I just sort of have a general feeling about where I am with stuff, but I'm open to all
That's commendable.
possibilities.
That's commendable though, because most people are steadfast in their values and their views and
I don't know how you can be, because like the way we perceive everything is like such an illusion. Like with the like our very perception of reality is so it could be so wildly different from, you know, we might be so far off the mark. Everything is so hyper normalized. We never even step back to think of the absurdity of what this actually is, this experience is, because you know, we're born into it, and by the time we're sort of conscious and are able to hold memory, everything is like, this is just what reality is, you know, and we don't stop to often think, wait a minute, like, where are we and what are we doing here and what else is there and how did this all start? And you know, just to explain it with, oh, the Big Bang and evolution, all this stuff. It's like, okay, cool. I still can't grasp onto any of this, you know, and there's still like, okay, well, what's behind that? What's behind the Big Bang? Okay, yeah, the Big Bang, cool. But if I was at the Big Bang just before it happened, I'd be going, but where did all this come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Do you have a spiritual practice?
Yeah, I mean, I've meditated for on and off. I will say I've ebbed and flowed with it, but yeah, I've meditated on and off for let me think, probably 5 years or so. So not a crazy long time. And my wife is a yoga teacher and always encourages me, which is great because I need it. So yeah, I mean, I have a daily yoga practice at the moment. So yeah, I'm super open to lots of everything. Well, yeah, everything's probably too broad, but
broad.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely have a spiritual practice. Although I tend not to speak about it.
Because some motherfucker will tell you that you're wrong and that you shouldn't be doing yoga. You should be doing Pilates.
I don't feel like a weight of responsibility to convince anyone of anything with respect to spirituality, and it's just a personal thing, and I'm grateful that I can share that with my partner, and even better, she can encourage me to pursue it. But yeah, it's really not something I discuss very often, but it is a big part of the way I see the world. And I think this is like a big reason why I don't get caught up in stuff, why I'm optimistic, why I don't try and discuss things on the internet, because I tend to feel like everything just is as it is. There's a broader picture that we can't comprehend. In the same way, you know, when you open up the picture of the planet or the galaxy or the universe, we're all very, very small in it, aren't we? And that is that could make you feel liberated, or it could make you feel nihilistic, or it could have all sorts of effects on you depending on your personality. But you know, in the same way that we don't grieve the death of each cell in our body as they die every day, and then new ones are born, and it's very easy to get wrapped up in this egotistical view of the world. And that doesn't mean that we have to, doesn't mean that we let go of compassion and empathy, but again, it's coming back to the fear of death, isn't it? Ultimately, you know, if we're too horrified by the fact that people die, then it affects the way we see our role in all of this. And if it is that paralysis that I mentioned earlier, and that we will all die. And I think the biggest thing that came out of me losing Tom was a sense that we all die and that's okay. You know,
I was going to ask you what was the positive takeaway, and that's an incredibly powerful one.
Yeah, I think that would be the biggest one. And you know, look, if my wife or my daughter, if they die and tell me that, like, come to me the next day and say, "Oh, this is okay, right?" I'm not gonna agree with that, but I'm gonna be so wrapped up in the grief of it, which is totally normal and acceptable and valid, and understandable, and no one should be denied that, because it's a part of being human, because we love. And if we love something, that's the cost. You know, we have that connection, that attachment, and to lose that connection is extremely painful. But that's okay, and that's a part of existence. You know, and I think trying to remember that is important. I think it is important. I don't know where I've sort of taken you with this conversation in the last few minutes, but and I think a part of it is because I don't have a clear view on it, and I'm 32 years old, and whenever I die, I probably still won't fully understand. But I contemplate it, and obviously all the time, and trying to make sense of it, I think, is an important part of being a human. But that doesn't mean I need to take it to other people. There is a community of people that are doing that, and sort of and talking about it, and have been for thousands of years. And there's plenty of wisdom out there. But taking it to Twitter or Instagram, I'm not sure I'm going to see any kind of benefit.
I can hear Zeffy screaming, and Amelie probably needs a bit of moral reinforcement. Dan, I love you very much, and I'm very glad that I met you. I think about 7 years ago. Yeah, likewise. And it's a genuine source of joy that you and the brothers in your band have become close friends. And I'm constantly like, wow, I was a fan, and now I'm like really good friends with these guys. It's constantly. Anyway, before you go,
feelings are mutual, 100%.
Yeah, I genuinely hope to see you again before too long, despite the current situation.
I don't think that our plans to go to Australia are going to be affected, to be honest, because we didn't have any plans to go for a little while. So hopefully it's just going to be all as planned, there's no plans.
Well, there was some talk in the media here that we might have an incredibly smart border, given that we're an island nation in New Zealand, so is Australia. And I think they wanted to include Singapore, and that we had the ability to travel within those three countries. So should you decide to immigrate, you might be able to benefit from that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time seeing the planet exit this situation. But
yeah, it is.
I'm optimistic. Again, the truth of this situation will be you've got people saying this is end of the world, and you've got people saying this is nothing and we're reacting, and I'm sure it's somewhere.
I started with that. I glibly tweeted, like, seems like a whole bunch of media hype. And then a few days later, I went, hey, remember when I glibly tweeted? Like, this seems like media hype. I was wrong. That was stupid to say. I think it is, like you say, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's serious enough that we have the protocols in place that we do around the world. But there are plenty of people who would disagree with me and who are far more educated than me to talk about it.
And if you say it's not serious, then someone who's had someone die will
yeah. How
say it's really serious. But then it's very hard once you've been affected in that way to see it clearly. I haven't been affected by it at all, other than having to leave Bali early. And so I'm also not totally able to, I'm also not able to effectively see it for what it is.
James Hartley, photographer. I think he posted a photo of like a makeshift morgue at the end of a street in New York, and that really got me because it wasn't a mainstream media source. It was just a guy that I'm acquainted with who I know to be a good person.
Yeah,
talking about the reality of it, and I think that's something that we should keep in mind. Like people are, suffering and dying and losing people.
100%.
And it's worth staying at home for a while, even though we might get a bit antsy. Anyway, I wanted to let you go be a family man. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, and give me a text, bro.
I will do.
We'll talk some shit in a less orchestrated fashion.
All right. Sounds good.
You take good care, Dan. Yeah, I love you too, brother. Bye.
Take care. Bye.